One car is involved in this crash, looks like, but it's pulled over to the side. We do have a tow truck blocking one lane, but traffic seems to be light and getting by without any major issues. At least one person, however, died in a bad crash on the Katy Freeway overnight. One of the vehicles involved appears to be a Cybertruck, the other vehicle too charred to make out what it is. ABC 13's Brandon Hamilton brings us the details nearby the scene.
Good morning. Traffic is back to normal, but that was not the case for nearly 6 hours this morning. Where we are standing is where police believe the driver got onto the freeway going the wrong direction. What we know from Houston police is that officers were called just after midnight to the Katy Freeway near the Washington Avenue exit. We're told the male driver of a BMW drove down the exit ramp onto the freeway, then went westbound into the eastbound lanes. Police say the BMW then collided with the Tesla Cybertruck. The impact, police tell us, sent the Cybertruck into an 18-wheeler and the BMW caught on fire. Police say the driver of the BMW died on scene.
The driver and the passenger of the 18-wheeler remained on scene, and they witnessed everything and were able to collaborate what other witnesses were saying. And at that time, they are fine with no injuries.
And police also tell us the driver of the Cybertruck was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Reporting in Houston, Brandon Hamilton, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Good morning, class. How are y'all doing? Hey, hey.
Good morning.
Anybody there? Is anybody there? There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Let's see.
Morning.
Hey. Okay, how do I get this to show? I'll just do it like this here. Da-da-da. This whole thing. So, you know what? I'll just do it the easiest way that I know how. So, okay, that's not it. Where is it at? I'm sorry, I got so I got a bunch of I got a bunch of windows open on the computer, so I can't find the one I'm looking for. Um, okay, I think I found it. Right here. All right, everybody, can you see it now? That took a while. Um, so we do not record lectures on Blackboard. Um, so steer clear of that. That's clearly not true. We don't record lectures, but what you can see is everything that we're basically, I mean, not everything, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to be on the exam that's currently here. You know, if not, well, everything here will most likely make it on the exam. How about that? Doesn't mean it will, but it will most likely. You need to know the four types of taxes, the two tax rates, which are a progressive, regressive, as you know. You know, we talked about some stuff in our lecture on voting rights and things like that, where we talked about the first woman, African American, Mexican American. A lot of these things came up in the first section. So it was just a lot of stuff that's coming back. We'll talk about Robin Hood, TEA, the State Board of Education. Need to know the types of primaries, the three historical types of primaries. And then we have the two types of primary, which is open and closed. But remember those three historical types of primaries that I told you all about, which is important as well. We'll talk about line item veto, the different types of elections and vouchers and things like that, and those terms that have been popping up throughout our lecture. Okay, so hopefully that will be very helpful to you all. Um, okay. I don't always give these, so I don't know if you'll get one for the last exam, but you know, there we go. And there it is in the chat. Um, if that's easier for you. Anyway, welcome back, everyone. So we have an exam on Thursday. All right. So you get your exam out of the way, you can get your head start on a Halloween and everything like that. It should be great. Any questions about anything? No questions. The smart class, like you guys know everything. This is good. This is good stuff. Um, all right. Before we get going, let me just so first and foremost, from the lady who brought you her greatest hit, a great hits like uh, the state is going down the drain, being run by Greg Abbott, and Greg Abbott hates the environment because a tree fell on him. Um, Sarah Eckhart is running for Michael McCall's seat in Congress. Um, now, she's she's loved by me. Okay, where'd they go? Yeah, so they call her the Elizabeth Warren of Texas. I just don't see Elizabeth Warren saying things like that. But she is Elizabeth Warren of Texas, as they call her. She's a very popular candidate for young people. Like a lot of young people love her. Um, Here she is here. Clearly, based on the comment that I made, I mean that I told you that she made about Greg Abbott. And if you didn't know, Greg Abbott is paralyzed in a wheelchair, and a tree had fallen on him, or a big branch or something like that. And that was her comment there. Um, which I'm telling you this because it'll come up later, I'm sure. But anyway, the important the big deal about this is, yeah, she's running because she's one of those candidates. She's a um who's going to be able to raise a lot of money and stuff like that. But the bigger deal is that someone like Michael McCall um is no longer going to be in Congress. So let's take a poll here. If you think it's better or worse, so let me know if you think it's better or worse to be in Congress for a long period of time. You can type it in there, right? Do you think it's better or do you think it's worse to be in Congress for a long time? Is it better to have a member there forever? Like we got Lloyd Doggett who's been there since like 1988 or something like that. Is this better or worse? I got worse. Come on, what do y'all think? Worse? All right. Alex is like it's better. Come on, helping y'all. I'm helping you get these participation points. It depends on other views. Okay. Okay. Clark is for the term limits. Worse. Okay. This is good stuff. And thank y'all for participating. Um, and Nathaniel thinks they're all going to be bad no matter what. It don't really matter if they're there for 1 year or 1,000. So, which is I'm assuming that's what you're saying. It's interesting because in the state house, it seems like it is worse, right? Seem like it's worse. Now, at the federal level, now we're at this point where I don't know, right? I don't know. Now, Kathy and Zion are onto something. Are you willing to change your views over time? Are you willing to see things? You've seen people. Republicans and Democrats have a huge shift on just same-sex marriage over the years. And you've seen a huge shift on certain things where they're like, well, I used to be this here, but then now I've seen the light and I've kind of just changed my views over time. They probably had children, their children talked to them and changed their mindset about it and things like that. But here's the thing, right? And, I understand, Clark's argument about term limits. A lot of people would agree with that. The issue is this, is that when you're there for a longer period of time, you are able to create relationships with people, which means that you become a senior member as well, which also means that you get to be on the better committees, the more powerful ones. You know, every now and then you'll get someone like Ted Cruz who showed up, Marjorie Taylor Greene, um, Jasmine Crockett, AOC. Um, it's certain people like that who show up and they just put you on a nice committee because of who you are, because you had a huge following. But most of the time, you get put on one of those other type of committees, right? You don't get to be on the committee to decide who's going to be the Supreme Court justice, right? You don't get to be on the committee to look at national intelligence. You don't get to be on the committee to investigate certain things and stuff because that is reserved for people who've had long periods of time in Congress. And the seniority matters. It doesn't matter as much with the Republicans that it does with the Democrats as you see leadership in one versus the other. Over the past, 25 years, 30 years or so, the leadership in the Democratic Party is a lot older than the Republican Party. The Republican Party, they shifted away from that after Newt Gingrich and his contract with America. He's like, I'm going to put who I think should be there. I don't care how long that you've been in Congress. But all in all, that long time in Congress allows for you to get placed on good committees or better committees. And losing Michael McCall is going to be a huge blow to the state of Texas, right? Because he was always there on intelligence. If anything happened around the world, this guy would appear and he would talk on the Sunday morning shows. Him and Trump don't really mesh well. I mean, President Trump doesn't really go against the guy much, but he certainly doesn't support him. And it's this new role, right, where someone like Michael McCall, who's like a Bush Republican or so, is not going to be able to operate well, in an environment like this. And Michael McCall, as powerful as he is, and at one point he was the wealthiest member of Congress. Um, Still, just feels like it's probably best that I get out of here, right? And I don't think that he's seeking a higher job or anything like that. He could have easily been whip. He could have easily tried to run for speaker or something like that. He's that powerful. He's loved by a lot of people. A lot of Democrats like the guy as well, because they're like, we just disagree on policy, not on reality. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that the Republican reality is different from the Democrats. Reality is just there are different realities now on both sides. But Michael McCall is that guy sort of, um, in the middle, but they don't really mess with him because he's been there for a long time and he knows everything about the intelligence and things like that. So it's going to be I would say a sad loss to the entire state, no matter which party you're in. Here's the other side of it. If someone like this lady happens to somehow win this, which will be based on how many universities are in her district, because if she got a bunch of colleges in her district, she's probably going to have a huge turnout. Because again, young people love her, right? But if someone like this somehow wins, which I don't know how she would in that district, but if she somehow wins it, we could see her on a nice committee. Now she won't be on intelligence, but she might be on a nice committee. Um, you know, because the simple fact that she's probably going to go in with the same amount of star power as Beto, right? When she gets going. So, but we'll see how it goes. It's going to be interesting to see, but yeah, I appreciate y'all participating there on that. I will I will say one more thing that, you know, I've always like I had an issue with term limits. I've always had issues with term limits, but not here. One of my main arguments was I hate term limits in Mexico. The president gets like a term, and I'm like, imagine if they gave them 2 terms, how much better they would do because they know that they can be reelected. The fact that they know that they can only be elected once, they're just gonna, take as much as they can. But to Clark's point, I guess we don't, at times it's hard to know because depending on who you get, right? Or as Nathaniel says, we don't really know if it's going to be better or worse. You could just be getting somebody terrible. And yes, having some fresh minds, Kathy, is a good thing. The thing is, a lot of this comes down to, as I mentioned during our lecture on interest groups, members of Congress becoming lobbyists. Like, do you understand the system? You ever worked at a place and new people come in and something happens and they don't know how to handle it, and you're like one of the only older people who've been there for a while, or not older, but you've been there at least a year. Everybody else has been there like 3 months or less, and you're like, dang, I got to go handle this too. Dang, I got to handle this, and they're like, oh, I just handle like this. You're like, you're not supposed to do it like that. That's not how this goes. You know what I mean? And I think that that's that's why the Senate is set up like that, to not have huge turnover all at one time to shock the system. Because even, the framers understood that the system is going to be a shock to the system if you have all of their term, if you have everyone to come back at the same time in the Senate, right? We already have everyone coming back in the House at the same time. You can't do the Senate too. It's just going to mess up the system because it's too many things. And even in Texas, like when we have our judges to run for office, a lot of those are staggered, right? 2022 we get some. 2024 we're going to get the third, and in 2026 we're going to get the other third, and then the next third, and then that third that went in 22 will go again in 28, just so you don't mess up the system and put a shock to the system. Because yeah, having fresh minds are good, but how much of a shock to the system will it be? You know. So who's the judge? I haven't heard about this judge. I'm down here in Hayes. Because I had never heard about this. I didn't know that this would happen. A lot of times, we have situations where if, being a judge, I would argue is we're not always happy with them, but and believe me, I'm not, because I don't know this case or anything like that, but you know, when you're trying to work in, within the law, a lot of times you're looking at somebody, it's kind of like, if you're a teacher, you know that that student has done something, but you can't prove it. You're like, I know you did it. I just know it. But the question is, if you can't prove it, is it right to allow for them to get out, right? And I mean, I'm sorry, is it right for you to just go at them anyway because you feel strongly that they are clearly wrong? And I wonder about this here. Um, Yeah, we have to look into this here. Oh, I gotta look into this because because I'm voting this week to see if he's on. I don't know if he's on the base. He on the no, he shouldn't be on the ballot this week. He should be on the ballot next year, right? So, yeah, I have to check him out. Carl Hayes. I will look into him. That's the beauty of this country. You get to hold people accountable. Um, Unless they're appointed, then you got to hope that other people will hold them accountable. So, all right. Typing in his name. so I can look at them, so I can look them up later. All right, thank you. All right. I believe that we did we get to a progressive tax rate? I feel like we talked about ability to pay. I'm sorry, y'all. So the three ways that the most common rationalization for taxing: tax to control people, tax to the benefits that are being received, and tax based on your ability to pay. If you make more money, then you pay more, right? That's basically, how it goes. Um, the tax rate, right? We have the the tax rates will be the amount per unit of taxable item or activity. And we have two types of tax rates. And here they are: the progressive tax rate and the regressive tax rate. I think that we went over this. Um, the progressive tax rate, basically, as you make more money, then you pay more, right? So we have people who will pay a smaller percentage if they make less. And as you make more, then you pay more. But it doesn't mean that, again, it doesn't mean that if you make $200,000, then you're going to pay 35% or 30% on $200,000. You're just going to pay 30% on whatever increment that's set up there for you, um, as we went over on that chart, right? And clearly, if you make more money, then you can pay more according to the progressive tax rate, because people who don't make much are concerned with the necessities of life. Now, here's that chart, right? Which basically shows shows what I was saying, right? So if I made $86,000 and you make $400,000, then we're gonna pay the same amount on our first $8,700, and then we're gonna pay the same amount on from 8,700 to 35,000, right? And then we'll pay the same amount from 35 to 85. And then now my 85 to 88, said that little bit that I've got to, right? Exactly. When I'm comparing it to yours, will be at 28%. Since you're still going, your 85 to 178 or whatever is going to be at 28%. And then your 178 to 388 is going to be at 33%, and then everything else is going to be at 35%. So all your money is not being taxed at 35%, just everything over 388. Not saying that you should like that either, but I'm just saying it's much better than thinking, oh, they're taxing all of my money at 35%. They're taxing all of our money at 28%. No, they're just taxing everything from this part to this part. Um, so there we go. The regressive tax rates. The rates decrease as a base increase, imposing a greater burden on low and middle income taxpayers than on wealthier ones. So what does that mean? It means that if you make more, then you pay less. As you make more money, you pay less. So our state sales tax is 6.25%, right? This is the tax rate that we have in Texas, the regressive tax rate. So if I ask you, name the tax rates: progressive, regressive. Which one do we have in Texas? The regressive, right? Um, Declining marginal propensity to consume ultimately says that as you make more money, you will spend money and spend money, but then you'll start to save. So you start to get to a point where you are going to start to save money and invest the money and things like that. So you're spending a smaller percentage of that income, um, versus just spending all of your money. Or at least this is the hope, I guess, of people. Um, Tax shifting. Again, I believe we talked about this as well, but tax shifting is it when taxes increase, businesses raise prices of their services, shifting the burden on consumers. So think about it like this here, right? As I always give the example of renewing a lease. So if you're renewing a lease at an apartment, right? Or then they tell you things like, okay, we're gonna raise your rent or whatever to by $50, and you're like, what? Yeah, we're just gonna raise it by $50 a month, and that's it. And you're thinking to yourself, why? Like you didn't do anything to my house. I mean, to my apartment. My apartment looks the same. Well, that's because they're shifting that burden of taxes onto you. The state passed a law about 18 years ago or so that said that landlords are able to shift the cost of property taxes onto the tenants. So they're raising that cost so you can pay that property taxes. Um, Supply side economics, right? This basically argues that the people at the top should be taxed less because they're going to be nice enough to invest in the economy. It happens at times. Most of the time, it doesn't happen. I always argue that it doesn't mean like it's the best system. It's the best system in the world. The supply side economics, the trickle down. It's the best system. The problem is we just don't have good people. We just don't have good people, right? If you have kids, you understand. And you hand one something, you tell the oldest one to split it in half with the younger one, they never break it in half. The older one always has a little bit more, and they give it a little bit to them. And then you're like, man, why can't you just split the thing? And they're like, I tried to, but they didn't. And they didn't, right? This is, essentially how it is. When people have access to stuff, they're probably gonna just say, you know what? I don't know if I should really put that out there. And sometimes they don't invest it. Sometimes they don't help to stimulate the economy because the economy is kind of bad. Like, why would I put my money out there right now? I'm just gonna wait a little longer, and it slows the economy down at times and stuff. So. Madison said if men were angels, then we wouldn't need a system like this in place. But men are not angels, so we have to create this kind of system to force them to check and things like that to put checks on people. The Constitution does limit state borrowing, right? But it's less restrictive on local governments. Now, they did pass, Congress did pass a law to put restrictions on school districts when it came to borrowing. And we got these legal obligation bonds that have to be repaid from the taxes, from general taxes, and we have revenue bonds that will be repaid with the actual revenue that they make from the service that they are providing. The lottery seems like it's going away, but maybe not. I don't know what's happening there. They're trying to get rid of it. They're trying hard to get rid of this here. Um, it was this huge argument because people were using their credit cards to purchase lottery tickets, and they said you can't use a credit card to purchase a lottery ticket, but you can use, I believe, a debit card to purchase a lottery ticket. Um, I would argue you shouldn't use anything to purchase a lottery ticket, but whatever, right? We also have licenses and fines, and then we lease to the public lands. Leasing the public lands, as I mentioned to you before, the railroad commissioner and the land commissioner are all in battle over who gets to decide who can frack and who can drill and who can do all this here. The railroad commissioner gets to decide who can drill and frack. But the land commissioner is like, I don't care. I'm not going to let you lease the land to even drill and frack or get out there and do anything. So it was this huge battle between Jorge, which is Jeb Bush's son, um, um, Jorge Bush, and the head of the Texas Railroad Commission, right? Because both of them are the oil families of Texas. Craddock is her last name. Da, 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 da. As you know, we have a legislator that makes a 2-year budget, right? Every 2 years, our budget comes out. Um, so we meet every other year to make the budget for the following 2 years. And as you know, we only meet 140 days every 2 years. So we get together and immediately at the start of the session, we get started with that budget bill. And it's basically just going through everything, and I'll run through that, but it's basically just making sure that everything are taken care of, is taken care of. We do have dedicated funds and things like that. These are payments that have to be paid. You have to find a way to take care of that because it's in the Constitution and it has to be paid. And as I have there, it's non-negotiable and stuff. It must be paid no matter what. Okay. The budget has to be balanced at all times, which I think is fine for a state constitution. I don't think it's fine for a national constitution, but state constitution, yeah, the budget must always be balanced, and that's how we have it here. And the comptroller is going to look at the comptroller is the treasurer. So whatever we approve, the comptroller is going to look at it and say, yes, we have enough to pay for it, and that's when they certify it. All right. Um. Da da da. Let's get through these. Got a lot of extra stuff. Let's get to the budgetary process. Your budget, uh, the budgetary process. All right, here we go. So this is how it gets going, right? Everybody ready? Good. So at the start, there's a biennial review estimate. Before every legislative session, this biennial review estimate is prepared by the comptroller. As I mentioned, the comptroller is the treasurer essentially. So it's basically the comptroller looking to see how much money do we have to spend, right? How much money do we have to spend? The comptroller says we have $250 billion. Here you go. So now, basically, the comptroller is going to let the legislative budget board and governor know, how much money they have. Now, in this process, the legislative budget board and governor's office are going to work together to create these forms, in a sense, so that the agencies can fill out their budgetary requests. Everybody understand what I mean? It's essentially, okay, let me make it easy. It's essentially what I'm telling you, right? So the treasurer is going to tell you how much money that we have to spend. The comptroller, that's what the treasurer is working on. They're counting up how much money that the state has made and how much money that we have to actually spend. The comptroller, the budget board and governor's office. So the Congress and governor are going to work together to create these forms. They're just creating a form so that the agencies can write out everything that they need, right? If you're submitting a budget to me, you're like, I need, $800 for the staplers this year. I need $6,000 for copy paper, right? You're just filling out a form to write down everything that you need. So I'm gonna take that as yes, you do. I don't know. I didn't hear you. I don't know if you can. Um, a little more what? Or you understand it a little more? Or you understand it less? That's a great answer. Uh, okay.
I'm
I got
sorry.
a question. Yeah.
What you say? Okay, you know what? Let me keep going and I'll see if it makes sense. How about that?
Okay.
All right. So now we know how much we can spend because the comptroller told us. And now we have forms that we've created, that the Legislative Budget Board and Governor's Office have, that now these agencies can use to create a budget. Now, Congress, now we have the election, and now we get the new House and Senate, right? And now we're having a session immediately in session, right? We get started on the budget because it's going to take a while, right? In the Senate, Finance Committee will start a budget bill. In the House Appropriations Committee will start a budget bill. And then we'll send it to the subcommittees. And then the subcommittee, oh, it's the actual money, Clark. It's the actual money. So it goes so it starts in the main committee. Then it goes to the subcommittee. And in the subcommittees, that's when these guys are going to hold hearings and stuff. When you can come in, like if I'm from the state troopers, if I'm with the state troopers, I can come in and say, hey guys, listen, I appreciate the helicopter that you guys got us last time, but we don't need another helicopter. What we need is our more armor for this here and more of this, and this. And they'll say, oh, okay, then cool. So let's approve more of this and to take away the helicopter, right? This is where you see markup. This is, let me turn on the camera. This is literally them, them holding a bill and getting a pen and marking through that and saying, he doesn't want a helicopter anymore. Let me add this in here. Let me add this in. And they just write in the margins, right? Because they started off with a bill, but now people are coming in and saying, hey, we need 2 more helicopters. They're like, okay, then cool. Let's get them 2 more of those. And they scratch it out or they just add to it. They're just marking up the bill. That's exactly what they're doing, right? Pretty straightforward stuff, right? Now, we take all of those things that we wrote in the margins and stuff, and the Senate of Finance agrees or not, and they decide, okay, cool, this is good stuff. Let's now send it back to the full committee, right? And in the full committee, they're ultimately going to send it to the full Senate. So it goes from the committee to the subcommittee, back to the full committee, and then it goes to everybody, right? The committee is probably like 8 people, right? And then it goes to everybody in the Senate. Now everybody is going to vote on this thing here, right? To decide, are we going to approve this? In the House, it goes from the House Appropriation to the House Subcommittee, back to the full committee. They mark it up and all that. Then it goes to the full House so they can decide, are we going to agree to this here? Now, the Senate listened to him, and the Senate said, you know what? He said he didn't need a helicopter, so I'm taking the helicopter off, right? And the House says, yeah, we're going to give him a helicopter anyway, right? So they leave the helicopter there. So we got a House version and a Senate version. So the House version says helicopter, the Senate version says no, along with all the other things, right? And we're just voting on this, right? It's the same bill, but it's 2 different versions of it because those guys who came to talk to us in the Senate are also going to have to come and talk to us in the House, talk to the people in the House to make their argument as well during the public hearing. Now, what we're going to do now, after we have voted on our House version of the bill that has a helicopter and the Senate version that has none, we're going to now take a few people from the House and a few from the Senate and have them to come together with their bill, and you work it out. So we get like 3 people from the House and 3 from the Senate, 5 from the House and 5 from the Senate to come together and talk about the bill. Hey, look, I listened to the guys that they told us that they didn't even want a helicopter. Okay, so, but I feel like they need the helicopter. Yeah, I don't think we need it. It's going to be a waste of money if they're not even going to use it. All right, cool. Let's take it out. So now what they're doing is they're coming together and they are reconciling the 2 bills because we have to only have 1 bill, right? We can't create a law and vote to put a law into place on 2 different bills. It has to be 1 bill. So we're coming together, and the House people and the Senate people are compromising and saying, okay, cool, just take it out, but he also wanted more of this here. Okay, that's fine. I'll put that in there. Cool. So now we come up with this new bill. It's just The House and Senate bill has been merged into one new bill, right? And a lot of times we take the bill in Texas, a lot of times since it's controlled by one party, they take the Senate and the House version and staple it together and just send everything through, right? Because they're all one party. But most of the time, there's some compromise going on. They're like, I don't like the fact that y'all have this in our bill. Can you take this out? And they work it out and reconcile it. Now that we've created a new bill, that new bill has to go back to the House for another vote and to the Senate for another vote. Why? Because the House voted on their own version of the bill. The Senate voted on their version of the bill that says that it had no helicopter. The House version had a helicopter. And just because these 10 people got together in a room and agreed to take the helicopter out, it does not mean that the entire House is fine with that. You see what I'm saying? Doesn't mean that the entire Senate is fine with that. So now that has to go back to the House and Senate for another vote. If the House and Senate agrees to this new compromise version of the bill, then it goes to the comptroller, and the comptroller is going to look at it and say, okay, let me add all this stuff up that y'all got. You got helicopters, you got cars, you got all kind of stuff. You got staplers and everything in there. Let me see if it's under $250 billion. Okay, I checked it out. It's 242 billion. Cool. That's how much this whole bill is worth. Cool. Okay, we can do it. There we go. So the comptroller says it's fine. We have enough money to pay for it. It then goes to the governor, right? Now, the governor, he can veto the entire bill and say, no, I don't want this bill. Or he can line item veto, right? Meaning he can say, so a veto is basically saying, no, I don't agree with this bill. I'm not signing it. I'm not going to let it get through. But he also has the power in Texas to just mark through certain things, right? He can say, um, it's crazy because we kept that helicopter in there, but I'm gonna take my pen and mark through the helicopter and not pay for that, but let everything else go through. You see what I'm saying? He can just veto a portion of the bill. He doesn't have to veto the entire bill. And by vetoing a portion of the bill, it still has to be overridden with a 2/3 vote. So like if he vetoes the entire bill, then the Congress has to vote, and you can override his no, I don't want this with a 2/3 vote. If he line item vetoes, if he just marks through one thing in there, you still have to have 2/3 of Congress to vote to override it. And a lot of times people won't override it because they're happy to get the stuff in there that they wanted. The line item veto, as you can see, is found down there in Article 4, Section 14. If any bill presented to the governor contains several items of appropriation, he may object to one or more of such items and approve the other portion of the bill. So appropriation is essentially something that's going to cost the state money. Doesn't matter if it's 30 cents or $30 million. Now, Clark, here's the thing. It doesn't really eliminate pork, right? What it does is this, right? And I'll tell you some crazy stuff. If Brianna wanted a clinic in her district, and that's the only way that she gonna vote for this bill and approve it, and she's holding up the thing, and all of y'all say, okay, that's fine, Brianna, cool, 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 okay, we're fine with this clinic. I mean, we don't really like the clinic, but fine, if that's what it takes, it's fine. And Brianna said, okay, cool, then I'll vote for it. So she votes for it out of committee. And then she votes for it again on the floor of the Senate. And then once they do the whole compromise version, she votes for it again in the Senate. And now it goes to the comptroller who approves it, and it makes it to Abbott. And Abbott says, yeah, I was never going to let that clinic get through. I just wanted you to vote for this thing. And he puts a line through it. It didn't eliminate pork. It just took away her clinic so that they can get everything that they wanted. You see what I'm saying? So it doesn't really eliminate pork. It just eliminates pork of other people who you don't like, so that you can get their votes and stuff. And it also allows a governor to be to be vindictive toward people. As you know, Paul Ferguson, he used that. Remember early on, I told you all he was impeached because he marked through all of UT's funding, but he let everything else go through, and they turned on him. You know who else was about to get impeached? Rick Perry, because he marked through funding of the agency that investigates the executive branch. So no, this isn't like log rolling because log rolling is that I'm gonna pay you back if you pay me. So I need you to vote for something for me, and then I'll vote for something for you later, even if I don't agree with it. Look, so if I want like some, I don't know, I want, new jerseys or something like that for a team in my district, and I want the state to pay for it, right? And Clark wants a veteran memorial in his district. And I'm like, man, y'all can pay for that. He was like, all y'all can pay for those jerseys. And I'm like, all right, Darren Clark, that's fine. I'll vote for it so you can get your veterans thing. And he gets that. And I voted for that, even though I didn't really want him to get it. Then he votes for my stuff so I can get jerseys for some kids in my district. That right there is log rolling. You know what I mean? You scratch my back, I scratch your back. Boom, boom. A good question though. And it's not always, I mean, Clark could think that the kids need jerseys, and I could think that his district needs that. But a lot of times it's things that we don't agree with, and we're just voting for each other's stuff so we can get it through.
It could work, but when the states had weak governors, I always go back to South Carolina and even Virginia. When I was in Virginia, their governors were always weak. So if they line item vetoed something, it was something the Senate wanted done anyway. They wanted to move something through and didn't have sufficient votes, but by eliminating that later, they could come back to it. So, but if you get a strong governor who's opposed to doesn't have a large majority in the legislature, then I can see where that would that actually be a hindrance to you getting things done, especially if you're compromising.
Right, right. And the thing is, like, you got to use it wisely because once you mess them over, I ain't gonna trust you no more. I won't trust you. I'm not gonna let anything get through. I'm voting against all. You know what I mean? Like, you got me, man. But the, but the, but to Clark's point about pork, if you don't know what he's talking about, these are pet projects in your particular district. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean like that it's a bridge that's being built for Bill Gates to get to his home, right? And that's the only bridge there. It's just his home, and somehow we have to pay for it, right? What it means is it's just something that you want to bring home to your district. You're helping out your district, and you're like, man, we helping y'all. That ain't got nothing to do with us. Like, we're good over here, and we all have to pay for that. So sometimes the pork is I mean, all the time the pork is just things that's coming back to your district. It doesn't make it bad. It's just bad if you don't feel like paying for it for the people of Dallas and you don't live in Dallas. You're like, why am I paying for that? I don't live there. So, and this is what I just went through. I think I explained it better than this chart, I hope. But here are those agencies, right? Here are the agencies. So each one of these agencies, Brianna, just a recap to you, and I'm sure many of your classmates who probably didn't understand either. So basically, so we send each one of these agencies a form, and you can type in everything that you are looking to need for the next 2 years. And you tell me, oh, I need this, 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 and this, so I'm gonna need more money for this paper. I'm gonna need this. I'm gonna need all these things here to help our agency work better, right? Um, Health and Human Services is huge, right? Because it encompasses adult protective services and child protective service and all that there. And, at times there are some states that will pay that will repay you for gas if you're using your own vehicle, which I don't know if Texas does. I'm sure they do, right? To travel from one house to another and stuff, you get reimbursed and things like that. So that also has to be added in there and factored into there as well, because the state will pay for that, and I guess the state can get their money back from the federal government. I'm assuming that's how that works. I don't know, right? But and there are some states that will pay for you to take what do you call that when you learn to shoot, the shooting classes? I don't know what you call it. I'm so sorry. To get a handgun license. There we go. Shooting classes. So there are some states that allow for you to get handgun license, and it's paid for by the state because you're going to be out there in these dangerous situations with adult protective services and things like that, so that you can have these. And there are some states that will pay for you to get like a taser and stuff like that. So you get reimbursed for this stuff. And a lot of this has to be added into that budget. So when you give them the receipt or invoice, then you can get your money back, right? So, Brianna, there's no such thing as gun safety in Texas. This- I was telling my son, he used to shoot us with a BB gun. My older brother and I, because he was the oldest, we would be running from him. He'd be shooting at us, at me and all our friends and stuff like that. I was like, and I haven't seen any BB guns around, but he was like, "Can I get it?" I was like, "No, you cannot." You know. So we have two types of budget. Two types of budget, and those things are serious. If you cock them up a lot, they stick to you. You have to cock them just a few times so you don't really hurt anybody, right? But we have incremental budgeting, which is basically when agencies, what did I tell you all, on that other slide at the start? Incremental budgeting works like, I'll just show you. It'll be easier. I know I'm going all the way back, but incremental budgeting is basically when we look at our last budget and say, oh, so okay, last year we had this. Our last time around, let's just add 10% to everybody's budget because the state has grown by 10%. Oh, in 2001, our state has grown by 14%. So let's just add 14% to everybody's budget. It just makes it easier. You know what I mean? So that's essentially what we're doing. You can speed up the process. And now if somebody wants an extra, an extra, if somebody needs extra vehicles or an extra school bus and things like this, yeah, we could factor that in, when we have the hearings in the Senate and things like that. But right now, just a flat 13% increase for everybody, and then we can go from there, right? And that's essentially what I mean by the incremental budgeting. It just makes it easier. Now, the zero-based budgeting is the worst, right? It's it requires you to justify all of your need. Basically, you're itemizing each and every cost, which is not a good thing because at times, like if you don't get everything in the budget, like I don't know how much ink we're using. You know what I mean? Like we're gonna run out of ink at school, and we're gonna run out of paper at school. You know what I mean? So you don't really know. And we did zero-based budgeting one time, and it just didn't work out well. So the incremental budgeting works out much better and stuff like that. I'm not a zero-based budgeting guy. I don't like that. I don't. I would hate to be working at an agency and now you have run out of money because you didn't budget it well. And I don't assume, and yes, people should be, if people are getting paid to do the job to budget well, that's fine. But the problem is that you have kids who are relying on you to do your job well. And I don't know, you could be drunk when you're doing it, right? You're relying on elderly people. I'm sorry, elderly people are relying on you to do your job right and to budget well. So you got all these people relying on a few people to do this thing right when they are budgeting. And if they get it wrong, then it hurts all of these people. So I've never been a fan of zero-based budgeting. Um, then again, I was never a fan of doing, inventory at work when I worked at certain places. And I'm sure many of you, I haven't found anyone who actually likes, inventory. So the dedicated funds are funds that are constitutionally allocated to a specific program. right? These are constitutionally allocated to a specific a program, basically saying that these things have to go to certain programs no matter what. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If it has to go to an education program, if it has to go to like a university fund and all these things here, that's essentially what that is. And you're right, Clark. It doesn't take it innate, yeah, I don't really like, yeah, I don't like that because anything could happen. I'm not a fan
Well,
of
you,
that.
your school bus get instead of one flat tire, get six of them. So now what or three of them. So now the bus is just gonna sit there the next year.
And the thing is, like, what kind of tires do you want on these buses? Because we can get some retread tires, but who wants retread tires for kids? You know what I mean?
Exactly. We
It's
can
not
sacrifice safety and quality to fit the budget.
exactly. And log rolling, I explained that already. Karina asked about that is essentially just, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. You're supporting a person's bill so that that person can support your bill. And as we see here, this is Royce West and Tommy Williams talking about a piece of legislation, which you can see him making an argument to Senator West, who's probably going to vote with him on his bill, even though he doesn't really agree, as you can see on his face. But Royce West is a pretty cool, good dude. Uh-uh. Okay. So Article 7, Section 1 says that the state is creating a public school system. That's all it says. I know I got a lot of words here, but it basically says that a public school system is being created. A general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation of liberties and rights of the people. It shall be the duty of the legislator of the state to establish and make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools. Man, just get to it. All right, Article 7 creates the public school system, which is a nice thing to have. So this is my chart, right? I used to love this slide, but you don't have to write this slide. But this is one of the slides that kind of went with things. I haven't seen a lot of secessionists lately. I don't know if you've met these guys. They're hilarious. I went to school with a guy who is a secessionist, and he teaches this class in Houston at the university, well, at the college, down there. And I'm like, what are you teaching the kids, man? It's like, well, I'm not teaching them the truth because they can't handle it. I'm like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing? But if you talk to the secessionists, I don't know if I have any in the class or not, but you see them because they have trucks and it says it on there. It says that they have cards and everything. I will tell you that, a few years ago, I was very well, I say a few years ago. Um, it was about 10 years ago. I was very upset because the Obama administration went in and arrested some guys. Well, they didn't arrest them. They went in. So this is a group that believes that Texas has never really joined the United States. Um, the president of Texas lived, I think, in Fredericksburg, and the vice president lived in Katy. And they're apparently having a party or this thing that they do every year where they have like a rose party where they give roses and all this stuff like this. And the federal government came in and raided the place and took their freaking phones and iPads and all of their electronics. And then they left. And so this group has sent letters to the governor of Oklahoma and told her to cease and desist because they feel like that part is still part of the nation of Texas. Um, and I just, my thing is this here. We have to, I feel that we as a people have to get to the point of separating out things, right? Everything doesn't have to be an absolute, right? Is Texas part of the United States? Yeah, yeah, it clearly is, right? Do you agree that the nation of Texas is still around. And do you believe that it runs into Oklahoma? And Oklahoma is not even, all of that is not even part of Oklahoma. That's Texas, right? No, I don't agree with that. But the question is, are you fine with the federal government coming down and raiding places and taking people's electronics and leaving? But just because you don't agree with someone doesn't mean that the part that they're doing is fine. Like some of this stuff is freaking wrong. If it's wrong, it's wrong. So we have to be able to separate things out. We don't have to be absolutists and say, well, those people are crazy anyway, so who cares? No, no, you should care because right is right, right? And it doesn't matter that you don't agree with them on other things. This is something that could potentially happen to all of us if it happens to some of us. That's how I see it. If you remember years ago, um, I don't know, some of you are probably young, so you don't remember, and some of you probably weren't here, but there was a huge fight of biker gangs, I believe in Waco, at a Hooters or something like that. I don't know if any of you remember this here. It's like this huge fight that broke out, and it's this huge fight. And the police were on were out there sniping folks, just shooting them in the head. And people are like, "Oh, these gangs are violent." I don't give a damn if they're violent or not. I'm sorry. I don't give a care if they're violent or not. You can't just shoot people and murder them because like they're not even fighting you. Like they're on the side just shooting people while they're in a fight. It was the craziest thing ever, right? And nobody was mad at the police. You know, I don't know. It was just wrong. So, but that is true. That is Waco. So, if you remember, that we had a public school system under E.J. Davis, and then they were like, "Nah, we're getting rid of this with the Constitution of 1876." The Texas Grange said, "We will take care of a public education system, but we're not going to educate black students," and that was essentially how that went. So, for a period of time, black students were not being educated in Texas. Now we get to this young lady, right? We get the 1915 compulsory attendance law. Um, so if anybody has ever gotten a ticket for truancy, that's because of this law. I don't know if any of you have ever had a truancy ticket. Um, if you got in trouble for skipping school and all that, it's because of this law here. Listen, this is one of the most amazing laws ever. So we had children in factories, and I think I told you this, right? That it was states, especially in the South, where you couldn't say that you were anti-business, right? These kids are in these factories working. This is just wrong. Look at how they're treating these kids. You can't say that because who are you attacking? You're attacking a corporation. So what did they do? They turned to, we're moving into a new world, a more modern world where all children should be educated. Everybody should be able to read and write and learn those three R's, right? Clearly, writing is not doesn't start with an R, but whatever, right? And you know that right there got children out of the factories, right? The children who were left working in these businesses, it got them out. If you're between the age of 6 and 18 years old and you have not graduated, then you must be. She was elected. She was elected as the first woman elected in Texas, statewide, and we got free textbooks. So now textbooks are free for kids. At first, you had to pay for your textbooks, and now these books are free. To all of you people who are younger, who don't know this, we used to have actual books, and we had a little line. I don't know if you ever been to the library years ago, where you check out a library book, you have to write on a little card, you write your name, and it'll tell you who else has checked out the book. Well, the same way with our textbooks, like we'd have a little box in there. It's like it's 6 boxes or 5 boxes. That's how long that we're gonna have those books. And you just you get a new book, they hand it to you, and you write your name in it, and it becomes your book. And sometimes you get your older brother's book. Sometimes you get other people's book who has had it in the past, but ultimately you get that book and you keep it, but the book was free, or the book is free. All right. The Gilmer-Aiken law, it increased the state funding, and it created the TEA, or the Texas Education Agency, which is responsible for creating our state educational program. Right? It created these minimal standards for us that the teachers have to teach at, and they have to teach the students up to a certain spot. So the TEA is there to create the statewide curriculum. They accredit and rate schools. They oversee public school testing. They monitor the federal compliance of schools. They sometimes grant waivers to charter schools. They manage the adoption of textbooks. All right. And they also research data concerning public school demographics. So ultimately, these guys are here who are working with the school districts and ensuring that the school districts run effectively. That's the TA. The TA is appointed. So for the most part, these guys, the head of the TA is appointed. The other ones are all workers. So we got an appointed spot. Everybody else is working there. That's what the TEA is doing. All right. Also, the curriculum is determined by the TEA, most of it. And I'm a fan of public schools. I just am. All right. I don't have anything against charter school or private schools, but I am a fan of public schools. I do believe that they are agents of socializations. It allows for you to deal with people who you're going to deal with in your everyday life or at the workplace. It forces you to be around all kinds of people. It's like being thrown in a dorm room with somebody, right? Or I guess I'm assuming joining in the military, they force you in there with a bunch of people who you don't know and from different places and stuff. That's essentially what public schools are, right? They force you in there with a bunch of people, and you got to learn how to deal with people because that's what it's going to be in the world, right? Now, depending on where you are, it could be there reinforcing what's going on, in the area. They might have some sort of continuing education classes. If there are places around there that has like welding and things like that. And we've seen a shift, right, toward schools offering lots of programs and things like that, no matter if it's a culinary or being a barber, being an EMT and things like this. But there are some skills that high school students do graduate and don't have. And that's because back in the day, a lot of that stuff was taught by the time that you graduated high school. And we're not focusing on as much as that, much of those things at the moment now, because it is assumed that we're going to go to college. The State Board of Education, the SBE is what you see. The State Board of Education is there. They are elected. The TEA is hired on, and the guy at the top is appointed. The State Board of Education is an elected body, right? And these guys, they create a list of textbooks, or they like, hey, here are the books that we can use that you guys would be able to use. So think about it like this here. I got one group that says, here's a list of books that you can use. And I got another group that says, okay, thank you. And that they take the list from them, and then they take that list to the school district and say, hey, you can choose one of these books here. I got this from the State Board of Education. You see what I'm saying? The textbooks that are on the list clearly has, we sort of went over that last class right at the start. I told you all about, it was last class or class before then, right? I told you there are a lot of books that are banned. There are a lot of books that are controversial and things like this here, but they try to avoid those things and stuff like that. I gotta tell you. So, but I have always been someone who looked at things in terms of theories and things like that. I remember I was always look at stuff like this here. Just because you're being taught it at school doesn't mean it's gonna affect your life and stuff. That was my mindset. And I knew this, and this is what I was trying to explain it to my parents when my dad was like, you know, what are they teaching? This, and this. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm just answering the question, man. I'm just trying to get through this semester. I'm not worrying about none of this stuff. You know what I mean? And I'll give you an example, right? It's there we go. I'm just trying to get through this here. I'm not concerned about any of that stuff. But let me show you. Okay, where is it at? It's here. Da da da. All right, I'm gonna bring up. I'm gonna show you the clip, and then we'll come back to it. Okay.
Your Honor.
Da da da. Come on, thing.
Your Honor. The defense has brought to Hillsborough at great expense and great inconvenience 6 noted scientists. Their testimony is basic to the defense of my client. What Bertram Cates spoke quietly one spring morning in the Hillsborough High School is no crime. It is incontrovertible as geometry to any enlightened community of minds.
In this community, Colonel Drummond, and in this sovereign state, exactly the opposite is the case. The language of the law is clear, Your Honor. We do not need experts to question the validity of a law that is already on the books.
Well, what do you need? A gallows to hang him from?
That remark is an insult to this entire community.
And this community is an insult to the world. Your Honor, I request permission to withdraw from this case.
Mr. Drummond, you can't quit now.
Why not? You were ready to 5 minutes ago.
Colonel Drummond, what reasons can you possibly have?
Well, there are 200 of them. And if that's not enough, there's one more. I think my client has already been found guilty.
Is Mr. Drummond saying that this expression of an honest emotion will in any way influence the court's impartial administration of the law?
I say that you cannot administer a wicked law impartially. You can only destroy, you can only punish. And I warn you that a wicked law like cholera destroys everyone it touches, its upholders as well as its defiers.
Colonel Drummond.
Can't you understand that if you take a law like evolution and you make it a crime to teach it in the public schools, tomorrow you can make it a crime to teach it in the private schools, and tomorrow you may make it a crime to read about it, and soon you may ban books and newspapers, and then you may turn Catholic against Protestant, and Protestant against Protestant, and try to foist your own religion upon the mind of man. If you can do one, you can do the other, because fanaticism and ignorance is forever busy and needs feeding. And soon, Your Honor, with banners flying and with drums beating, we'll be marching backward, through the glorious ages of that 16th century, when bigots burned the man who dared bring enlightenment and intelligence to the human mind.
So this here is a clip from one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie, right? Inherit the Wind, and it's essentially about the Scopes trial is a high school teacher teaching a high school biology teacher teaching evolution, and and he gets arrested because I don't understand why you're teaching evolution. We understand how it got started. God, dirt, and and then a man showed up, right? That's essentially, how that all worked out. So we don't understand why you're teaching this. which essentially it just goes to the point I was making earlier. Like my dad used to, he had me to bring a book to school. It was this book called the Creation Book, right? And he was like, Give this to your teacher," and I'm like, "Okay." And I gave it to my teacher, and my teacher was like, "What's this?" It was an earth science class. And I was like, "I don't know." Like, my dad told me to give it to you. I have no idea. I don't know. Right? Like, I, like if I take this class and I stop believing in God, I probably wasn't there anyway. That's how I'm feeling, right? But it's called Inherit the Wind. But in this movie, it talks about, it's basically, it's loosely based on, or it's pretty much based on that trial where, a dude gets arrested for teaching a theory to students. And the whole idea is this is just a new theory, right? You're just teaching about this stuff here. And there's a fear of learning stuff. There's the fear that if a child learns something, that child is going to change their mindset. And we've seen the numbers that many of these children, they might change for a little while, 'cause they're going to change anyway, most of them, but they tend to come back around to their parents' values at times like that, or they sometimes move away from them, which is probably good as well, because sometimes their parents um, are prejudiced people at times. You know what I mean? So you got all kind of things going on, but this is one of those things, especially with that there, where the schools try to steer clear of these controversial things, and sometimes they're just teaching, and the controversy just somehow follows them around. Um, all right, we do have one more thing I want to mention, which is the Edgewood v. Kirby trial, right? So we get this trial where we have schools that are very, very poor in Texas, very poor schools. We had schools in the Valley area, especially that had no running water and things like that. And, so they were like, how do we do this? And many of you who have played a sport or were in band or anything like this, then that you've gone to some of these schools on the bus and you rolled up there on the bus and you looked, or maybe you went to one of them and you're like, this looks like a community college. This school is huge. And you look back at your school that doesn't even have a toilet paper and stuff, and all the parents have to chip in to help to pay for stuff. Well, ultimately, this was the whole Robin Hood law, right? It was now, after this case, we're going to take money from these wealthy school districts and redistribute it to the poorer school districts, right? The argument that was made was that, well, if you do this, then, we are paying in our community and our kids are not benefiting from it because you're giving the money to a school district that's not even around us. And the argument is basically, look, you don't need all of that money. This school, you can't have a school that again has a Chick-fil-A on the inside in the cafeteria, and then you got a school that is barely standing. We have to work this around. So it basically recaptured the property tax revenue from these wealthy school districts and then distributed to the poor school districts so it can equalize it. It was never equal, but it brought them up to minimum standards. But people were not happy about it. But that's essentially what the Robin Hood plan was. It came from the Edgewood v. Kirby law. So, all right. Well, that is that is that's where we stop. And I'll see you all. It will open up at midnight. You'll be able to take that on Thursday. And hey, see you soon.
Have a good day.
Look at Clark. Clark, I didn't leave you. Clark, I didn't leave you any time